Hi, you might have seen that I've recently been working on a new series looking at plumage, specifically looking at colourful birds all around the world. And as part of this series, I thought I'd show you how to draw one of the birds that I'm creating for this series. So it's going to be a draw along, but it's going to be a bit different from the ones I've done before, because it's going to be a little bit more complicated, a little bit longer, and and hopefully just as fun though. I'm going to be using acrylic inks to create this piece, but anything will work. You don't have to use inks. Paints would work, watercolours, pen, whatever you want really. I think it's more about sort of style and the process and the enjoyment of it really. So today I'm going to be showing you how to draw a Fiery-Aracari, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm using a photo from Dan Short. He's on my master's course, and I really hope you enjoy it. I haven't practiced this, so you are literally drawing it with me for the first time, so we'll see how it turns out. So with all of these pieces, I've been sketching them out in pencil first. It's just a really quick sketch, and so I'm going to focus on the Acaris, which has its beak open, it's holding a melon, but I'm actually going to change the way the beak looks a little bit later on. But first we just want to get the head and everything right, so I'm going to draw it coming from the left hand side of the piece because it's looking right. So first we want to draw the head. I tend to just draw circles to show bird heads, and then this is going to go down into the neck. There you go. Next I'm going to mark on where the beak's going. So the beak is going to be sort of curved, quite smooth and quite long as well. Looking at it compared to the head, it's about 2.5 times the length of the head. We can see that the beak has quite a few sort of serrated edges, especially on the top beak, but I'm not going to mark them on yet. I'm going to add those later. So the pencil sketch should be really just the bare bones of your drawing. So I am going to mark on the eye though, so there's these white marks on the beak, which are the edge of the beak, and then there's the eye about here, which I'm just going to mark on with a circle, and the pupil as well. I'm also going to mark on the red because around its eye, because that's quite a sort of defining feature, and I'm going to mark on the sort of chin, I suppose, the bit where the cheek of the bird, because there's quite a bit of shadow there. Lovely. So for the next stage I'm going to be using white gel pens. So I use Jelly Balls, but you can use, you don't even have to use white pens, but I use them to kind of mark on the detail before I start painting. So I'm specifically going to be marking on the pale detail of the bird. So for this one, I want to be marking on the kind of the bridge between the beak and the head of the bird, because that's white. I also want to be marking on maybe the parts of the bill, and also the very top of its head is catching the light. So I want to kind of highlight the feathers that are coming out because you can see some sticking out there. So I think I'm going to start with the top of the head first. And then I think I'm going to do the white line of the bill. With this I'm building on my pencil lines. so I'm not drawing it just straight on in pen. I'm also going to mark on the serrated edge of the top bill. So it's sort of just going to be like staples, I suppose, like if I had to compare it to a shape. And they're sort of semi-regularly along the bill. When I'm drawing, I'm always constantly looking back up to the reference image, and I would recommend that as a sort of a top tip. Not just for these pieces, but for pieces in general. Also, you'll see that I'm imagining the melon isn't there, just because I find it I want my series to focus just on the birds, so I'm removing anything that isn't about the bird and its colour and its plumage. But if you want to include the melon, feel free. I'm also going to mark on the end of the bill, because you can see there's a sort of glistening part to it in the light. All of these white bits will actually be covered over when I add ink, but it's a sort of extra bit of guidance for me when I'm painting. I'm just adding extra feather detail, just literally looking at where the feathers are catching the light. So sort of there's ones at the top, there's a few at the bottom. I am going to mark on the eye as well. I think eyes are quite sort of important to the piece, and this one is particularly striking because of its colour. The white lines are essentially adding a little bit more detail to the pencil lines. They kind of work together to make the sort of the outline of the piece that I'm going to be painting on. But obviously both are optional, you don't have to add the white pen. It's just something I really enjoy doing. Okay, I think that's enough white pen for now. So next I'm going to start adding my inks. So you might have noticed that I haven't been using black at all in this series. That is a decision that I've been making because I don't want to include, I don't know, I just thought it would be kind of a fun challenge, to be honest. So instead and also like looking at this bird, although it is black, there's so many other colours going on, so I think it'd be kind of fun to pick those up in the colours we use. So I'm going to be using blue, green and purple, I think, off the top of my head, but I also use a lot of white to bring attention to the detail in the piece. So I'm essentially, with this bit, I'm putting them all into a palette. I'm not mixing them at this point, but I'm adding all the colours that I think I'll want for this layer. I would recommend getting a mug of water for washing your paintbrush, available in advance. Paintbrush wise, I'm using a fine brush, but feel free to use whatever you like, as always. So I'm going to focus on the actual plumage of the bird itself, and as I said, it's sort of quite dark, but there are lots of colours going on. So on the palette, if I show you, I'm mixing a tiny bit of the colour together, and then I'm going to apply it and see what it looks like. This is nice and dark, so this will work for the cheek. And when I'm painting them, I'm trying to mimic the feathers. So I'm kind of pressing on the side of the brush quite a lot. And it doesn't matter if you can see the paper underneath, because I think that helps add to the piece, at least in my opinion. So because I'm doing the dark bit first, I'm doing all of the dark bits on the piece. So this bit's a bit more purple as well, which is quite nice, but I'm going to add some green because the whole bird has a nice green sheen. So when I'm adding specific colours, I'm literally dipping my brush, not cleaned, into the colour, and then it will have what I was painting with last, and then when I apply it, it kind of mixes a little bit better. I'm not sure whether everyone will like this technique, but it's what I like using. So I am just focusing on the dark bits, but then as I'm slowly getting lighter, especially when the ends of the paintbrush, when the paint starts running out on the paintbrush, if I flick down it can kind of, to me it looks more like feathers, and that's kind of how I've been adding some of the texture to my pieces. Like that kind of technique. It's definitely easier to demonstrate. With all of this, I paint the base layer, but I have the aim of going over in white ink on top, because I think that really helps bring the piece to life. So that's going to be the next stage that we're doing. I'm trying not to go into the sections that I don't want to have the dark colours on, as in I'm not going into the section where it's the red or the yellow, for example. When I want lighter colours, I'm actually just dipping straight into the pure colour of the ink I'm using, and then I'm going to blend it on the paper and also a little bit afterwards when I'm adding more colours on. But I think when applying the inks or the paint, it's very much like a personal choice how you do it. So as you can see, I've actually been going over a bit of the white that I was adding at the top of the head when I first drew it out. Like I said, the white lines are kind of for guidance, but I often don't keep them there. To me they act a bit like pencil, but adding a bit more texture underneath. Okay, so we're getting quite near the eye now, so I'm going to rest the base layer of plumage for a second and go on to red. So in between this I am cleaning my brush because I think it's really important to keep your brush clean when you're swapping colours. So I'm going to be using red, and I'm going to be adding this as a pure colour into my palette. So I'm just going to add it straight in, and again just following how it looks in the reference image. But then you'll start seeing that there are lighter bits and darker bits. And so to add that kind of texture, I'm going to dip my brush, not cleaned, into the purple or maybe into the blue. And then I use this to generate some of the shadows on the piece. There's also a bit of purple on the like the nape of the neck, so I'm going to add a few streaks here. Nice. So next is going to be the yellow of the eye, and then this will also form the base of the bill. So again, cleaning the brush in between, and we're going to pipette some of the yellow onto the palette. But that actually doesn't work, so I'm going to have to get a different pipette. Yeah. Okay, so making sure the brush is clean because we don't want to have a mix of yellows, but then adding the base layer of yellow first to the bill. There's also some underneath, like in between the top and bottom of the bill, so I'm going to add that. And there's some yellow sheen to the edge of the white that we added too. By layering the colours, obviously, you get brighter. So I do like doing that when the colours are a bit more vibrant. We also have the eye, so I'm going to do that now. When doing eyes, I tend to follow where the light's hitting them, so this one's the light's at the kind of the top right of the eye. So, and I also leave a space for the pupil, but that's just my personal preference. By adding yellow, you can obviously make the greens a little bit more kind of yellowy green on the breast. And then continuing with the bill. Now the bill kind of goes into an orange, so for this I'm going to dip this into the red and then literally dip it straight back into the yellow. The idea is you should get a really nice orange. So just following the colours in the bill, there's this sort of orange line at the bottom which I'm marking in. I'm trying to go over the white lines that I did when I was sketching the bill out. Nice. So we're getting there with the bill. I'm going to add a bit more orange, I think. And a tiny bit more red as well, reddy orange. Okay, the bottom of the bill is black, and as I said at the beginning, I'm trying not to use black. The very top of the bill here is actually sort of a greenish black, so I'm going to make a really dark version of that for the bottom bill. And to do that, I'm mixing quite a bit of green with some purple. Maybe a drop of yellow. I think with a lot of this it's just sort of trial and error, seeing what looks nice and what doesn't. There we go. So I'm happy with this colour, and because I'm happy with it, I'm just going to kind of go for it, I guess. Bill catches the light nearer the kind of gap between the two of them, so I'm kind of trying to reflect back that by layering more towards the bottom and having darker colours near the bottom. And then sort of lighter colours, more noticeably green and more noticeably blue near the very top. So, as I sort of wasn't saying anything, I'm layering colours, so if I'm not happy with the colour, like I wasn't happy with that really pale sort of brown colour that I'd achieved, I just layer colours and eventually you'll sort of find the right one. I'm not sure I don't really have a better way of describing that. I think it's just looking to see what the piece looks like and then trying to see how you can mimic the colours based on what you think works well together when mixed. So we're getting there. I've actually, if I show you my palette, I've mixed quite a lot of the colours by now. So I'm pipetting some fresh green on because I haven't got any. So don't be afraid to, if you are using inks or paint, don't be afraid to mix the colours when you're using them, and then it's definitely what they're there for, and I'd say it can really help you get the right colours when you're painting. Okay, I'm quite happy with how this is looking. So looking at the kind of this bit of the bill, there's these sort of white sections, but they seem to be underneath some sort of green, so I'm going to add some sort of faint colour. And using the paintbrush I can kind of get some detailed-ish lines in, and that will be especially helpful later. There's also some sort of colouring here. And so now this first layer is dried, I'm coming back to add this sort of second layer, so any extra colours and tones sort of a bit more dark where I think it needs it, sort of this sort of ridge bit here needs some more definition, and likewise there's some purple here as well as some here. So I think it's just a case of constantly looking at the piece and seeing whether what you've made looks like what's on the screen. I'm also adding some more detail around the red because there's definitely some darkness there. Okay, I'm happy with how this is looking. So now is sort of the time to start getting a little bit more experimental. Oh, actually, hang on. I have realised I haven't actually rimmed the eye or added the pupil. So for the pupil, it's sort of a case of mixing the colours to get it as dark as possible and as close to black as you can. So I think using a bit of this brown I created earlier, maybe a bit of this purple, bit of blue, bit of red, bit more. And kind of, again, it's just a sort of case of trial and error, seeing whether you're happy with the colour, but I'm happy with this colour. There's also some fine lines around the eye, which I'm going to add now. Okay, so now it's time to add some of the white. So clean your brush really thoroughly this time because you really don't want to get anything in the white ink or acrylic. So for this I tend to dip straight into the, for this I tend to dip straight into the actual acrylic ink, but that is also partially because I'm running out. Normally I would recommend pipetting it. So you just want to get like a small amount on your brush, and then it's literally a case of looking at the highlights. So the best way of explaining this might be on the bill actually. So there's a sort of white section down here, which I'm going to add on. And it's a case of kind of running your brush as much as possible while the ink is still drying. And then getting some more on. There's this nice sort of the sort of staple bits on the bottom, you see? And there's also this sort of divisive line, which I'm going to bring out a little bit using the white, as well as adding some more detail to it in a sec with the orange. There's this sheen on the end of the bill, which I'm going to add like that. And there's also this sheen on the top of the bill here, so I'm going to add that. And adding the white here will help me sort of bring out this orange in a second when I go back to it. I'm going to bring attention to a few more of these ridges on the bottom bill. And then the bottom bill this time, so there's the white of the actual, I don't know what it's called, but the edge of the bill. And then there's the sheen again, which is like that. There's definitely less sheen to this one, I'd say, but there. A bit more on the top one actually, I think. Okay, next we're going to do the actual plumage of the bird. So you want to kind of form kind of literally brush strokes, as in like you're stroking something with your brush, I guess, which is literally what brush stroke means, I suppose. But you want to make that kind of on the page with the brush to give the effect of feathers. And again, you're just kind of looking at the image and choosing out the lightest patches. And when it gets towards the bottom, you can make the brush sort of bigger to indicate that it goes on to something else. And give the impression that there are more feathers. There's a lot of white at the top, which I'm going to try and reflect. So there's also this ridge between the two bills, which I'm going to mark on, as well as the detail near its eye. Then there's the detail on the red sheen, like this, as well as the eye itself. Okay, so we're getting there, but it still looks kind of flat, so it's time to add some more colour detail. So again, rinsing and cleaning the brush. And yes, it's time to add some more colours. So this again, it's quite personal. It's how you are looking at the image. So I'm going to add a bit more blue, and I think when you are adding more detail, it tends to be a bit slower, more methodical, and kind of just leaning on the very tip of the brush, especially if it's a fine one, which is why I've been using a fine one. If you need to rinse your brush in between using colours, for example, I'm about to use a lighter bit of red and I don't want to mix it with the dark bit I was just doing, then do feel free to. Okay, I'm actually going to put a little bit of white onto my... I don't know if I'm getting out. I'm going to put a little bit of white onto my palette because I do want to be able to use some. I can't seem to find a clean palette, which is not good. Okay, I put some white on my palette as well. I'm going to use that to get actual sort of highlights for the colours now. So as you can see, adding the white is just making, especially the beak, it's giving a little bit more like texture, depth. So as we can see, we're getting there now. It's quite nice. And also don't forget to fill in the gap between the sort of jaggedy bits of the bill and the bill itself with some colour. So I think the bottom bill maybe needs a little bit more. So once it gets to this stage, it's just a case of looking at the piece and seeing which bits still need a bit more, which bits don't look quite right. So to me the chest still needs a bit more. I think the head still needs a bit more. Okay, I think we're nearly there. So I'm going to add a tiny bit more darkness just to these sections here. And then I'm going to add a bit more, a few more last minute highlights. Okay, so almost there, I think. I'm going to add a bit more purple again, so I've lost a lot of the purple I added. Okay, so hopefully this will be the final edition of white, but I think when it gets to this stage it's a case of sort of definitely using your judgment, kind of going up until when you think you've finished, and trying not to overwork the piece. So we're definitely getting there, I think. I'm finally going to add some more details to the eye just because I want it to be a little bit paler. And a bit more to the bill. So as you can see, I'm just sort of layering on, and this is definitely just like an individual process, how much you want to layer. Like I think it's basically there, but there's just a few more like bits of detail I want to add, and I feel like that just sort of keeps changing. The more I add to it, the more I sort of see extra bits that could be added. There, okay. So I think you could kind of go on forever, but I think personally I'm really happy with that, and yeah, I hope this has made sense or been relaxing or at least a little bit entertaining to watch. And I obviously didn't talk much, but I feel like that's because it's quite an individual process, and I hope it's formed a nice sort of little guide, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have enjoyed it, then let me know, and maybe I'll do another one. But yeah.